What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. Before I get into this video, I want to remind you guys, if you want to donate to my channel, if you want to show love to my channel, if you want to contribute to Too Raw for TV, you can do so in the links provided in the description box below. I also want to inform you guys, if you don't know, that I did create a Patreon page. I already have available content on that page, and we'll be uploading more in the near future on a regular basis. And it's only for a cost of $2 per month. On the Patreon, I will be able to talk about things that are too controversial for YouTube, that would be too politically incorrect, I guess, for YouTube. So if you want to hear Too Raw for TV, totally uncensored, please subscribe to the Patreon for only $2 per month. Now, I want to talk about something that's been troubling me for the past, maybe 10 years. I've been noticing this, and it's getting worse. And that's how the criteria for the Hall of Fame is dropping exponentially year after year after year. And I want to say this also flies in the face of those New Age fans who insist that NBA talent is getting better, which doesn't make any sense, because the players that are consistently getting into the Hall of Fame are increasingly more and more marginal. You understand what I'm saying? Like, years ago, when we had Hall of Fame inductions, you watched them, you saw guys like, let's just say, let's go back to 2000 or so, I don't know, maybe the late 90s. You had guys like maybe Magic Johnson getting in, and Larry Bird, you know, uh, Alex English, uh, great players, and maybe some guys that played long ago, and they got in through the Veterans Committee, just trying to think of people, man, just great players like maybe Bob Davies, uh, you just had legends. When you thought about Hall of Famers, you think about the all-time greats. You know what I'm saying? You think about George Mikan. You think about Paul Arizin. You think about Bob Pettit. Maybe a Walter Davis. Matter of fact, I'm not even sure Walter Davis is in the Hall of Fame. Wait a minute, let me see something. Because if they're letting some of these brouhahas in, they damn sure need to put Walter Davis in the Hall of Fame, even though he never won a championship. Let me see. Especially consider his collegiate career. Uh, no, he's not in the Hall of Fame. That's what I'm talking about. That's how you can tell that the criteria has changed. Now, Walter Davis, who retired, I think, like 91 or so, he's not in the Hall of Fame. I always forget whether or not he's in the Hall. He's not in the Hall of Fame. And he retired close to 30 years ago. Over 25 years ago, he retired. You put Walter Davis in the NBA today, and he's just retiring, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. They're going to talk about him being a Hall of Famer, especially when you combine his collegiate career, but he's not in the Hall of Fame. Adrian Dantley, it took him a million years to get into the Hall of Fame, because the criteria used to be so much harder. But you got guys like Tracy McGrady in the fucking Hall of Fame. A guy who never came out of the first round when he was a major contributing factor on a team. Never got out of the fucking first round of the playoffs. But he's a Hall of Famer. You got Harold Baines. I have nothing against Harold Baines going into baseball. Harold Baines was a fine player. A fine player. But a Hall of Famer, look, come on, man. Just because we like these guys, you got to be fair and impartial when it comes to this process. You can't just be putting people in the Hall of Fame just because you like them. He's a nice guy. And I think that's what's going on. I noticed that certain people who probably were accessible to the media, who are very press friendly, they get the benefit of doubt from these fucking yahoos, you know what I'm saying, who are press members, who have a say in who goes in and who doesn't go in into these Hall of Fames in these different sports, whether it be baseball, whether it be the NBA, whether it be hockey or whatever, boxing, I don't know, whatever it is. But then you got these guys who are the creme de la creme, all right? Like a Randy Moss, like a Terrell Owens, okay? Who may have been controversial personalities. Barry Bonds, that's a whole, I don't even want to do it. I've done several videos about Barry Bonds, okay? So I don't even want to go into that. Barry Bonds is just, it's a fucking disgrace that he's not in the Hall of Fame. And the same thing goes for Roger Clemens, okay? Those guys are first tier Hall of Famers. Even if you take away the years when you think they were juicing, or when you suspect they were juicing, they did enough in the clean years to be first ballot Hall of Famers. The fucking Hall of Fame is an absolute joke. It's a joke. Joke. It's a joke, man. Going with baseball for a minute, sticking with baseball for a minute. I understand Pete Rose violated a sacred rule in baseball, but it's been 30 goddamn years. There's no fucking reason that Pete Rose is not in the Hall of Fame, but they're talking about putting fat ass CC Sebastian in the Hall of Fame. There's something infinitely wrong with the way these things are structured. There's something wrong. Now, the reason why I have a picture of Tom Chambers up here, Tom Chambers was a member of the 1981 draft, one of the best drafts of all time. I think the best draft ever was 1996, then followed by probably 2003 and 1984. Then I'll put 1981 right under those drafts. You had guys like Tom Chambers, you had Mark Aguirre in that draft, you had Kelly Tripucka, you had Isaiah Thomas, Danny Ainge. Now I know Danny Ainge doesn't resonate with a lot of young people other than a shitty owner of the Boston Celtics, but Danny Ainge was a fine player. Not a Hall of Fame caliber player. Uh, he was an all-star just 1 year. I think it was the 87-88 season. I think it's the year where he averaged about 16 points per game. I don't remember how many rebounds, maybe 6 or 7 assists. At that time, he had set a then record for most three-pointers in the season with 148. That record was subsequently broken the very next year and has been broken several times over, you know, through the Michael Adams and the Dale Ellis's and the Reggie Millers and ultimately the Ray Allens and the Stephen Currys, okay? So that seasonal record's been broken several times over and over again. But he was only an all-star for 1 year, although he had his best years statistically with the Sacramento Kings, but he wasn't an all-star because he's in the Western Conference, which is so loaded, and putting up, 17 points per game or 20 points per game on a bad Kings team, along with Kenny Smith or whoever, it's not really impressing anybody when you got, all these other great players in the Western Conference. And speaking of great players in the Western Conference, in that draft, of course, you had Tom Chambers, like I said, and Tom Chambers. I bring him up because he's one of only two players in NBA history to score 20,000 points but not be a member of the Hall of Fame. The other one, of course, is Antoine Jameson. Now, both these guys were fine players. They played long periods of time. Tom Chambers was a high-scoring forward for the Phoenix Suns and the Seattle Supersonics. I think he had like a 4-year span where he averaged over 20 points per game. 5 individual seasons, I believe, he averaged over 20 points per game. In the first 10 years of his career, he averaged at least 17 points per game. And all but the last season of his career, a full season that is, I believe he averaged better than double digits points per game. I think the last year he played with the Utah Jazz, he only averaged like 6 or 7 points per game. But he's not in the Hall of Fame. because many people feel like he wasn't consistently dominating enough to be a Hall of Famer. But I bring him up, and I bring Antoine Jameson up because you see, Antoine Jameson retired a few seasons ago, maybe 2014. I can't remember exactly what year he retired. Tom Chambers retired 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. But Mitch Richmond, who also put up 20,000 points in his career, was able to ride the pine to get a championship with the Lakers. If I'm not mistaken, Mitch Richmond's a Hall of Famer. Now, I do believe Mitch Richmond was a better overall player and much more consistent player than Tom Chambers and Antoine Jameson. But when you look at the raw numbers, still, these guys all played long periods of time and put up 20,000 career points. So I have an issue when you have guys like Jack Sikma, who I think is getting the call to be in the Hall of Fame. They won a championship with the Seattle Supersonics in 1979. But Jack Sikma never comes up when you think about the best centers in the NBA during the 1970s and 1980s. He's a fine player. He was one of the best jump shooting centers in the league. Uh, Ultimately expanded his range to 3-point range. But consistently, he was more of a 15 and 10 guy. You know, he wasn't a guy like Moses Malone, who in his prime was putting up, 25, 27, 30 points, 16, 17 rebounds, or Kareem, 27 points, 13 rebounds, or Shaq, with these dominant numbers. Kareem, even other guys like Bob Lanier or Patrick Ewing or Willis Reed, or even Bill Russell putting up 15 and 20. But yet he's a Hall of Famer. I have issues with the inconsistency with the Hall of Fame, man. Okay. I argue this with a friend of mine. He loves sports just like me. He feels that the Hall should be even more stringent than I do. He thinks that only people like Kobe, Mike, Wilt, the absolute legends should get into the Hall. I can stomach maybe guys that are sidekicks getting in. You know the Scottie Pippens and the Dennis Rodmans. I think Dennis Rodman is marginal. A lot of people had issues with Rodman, but I think it's kind of hard to keep a guy out of the Hall of Fame who had such a dramatic impact on the teams that he played on. I understand he was a limited scorer, but on the flip side, you have guys like Steve Nash who are Hall of Famers who are very limited defensively. Awful defensively, honestly. But Dennis Rodman is a 5-time NBA champion, won 7 consecutive rebounding titles, 2 consecutive Defensive Player of the Year awards. I think he was a 4-time All-Star, Dennis Rodman. I can't remember exactly how many All-Star teams he was on. Maybe 3 or 4. So he's a marginal case. But statistically, he has a case for being one of the greatest defensive players, one of the most versatile defensive players, and arguably the greatest rebounder of all time when you look at the raw statistics and analytics. So he has a strong case for being in the Hall of Fame. But like I said, there are these other guys. I just don't know, man. It's getting to the point where it's a popularity contest. I'm also beginning to think, like in the case with Jack Sikma, for instance, you see how the center position has evolved over time. It's become less of a physical banger, scoring then a block down low to more of a stretch position. And I think with people who watch basketball now, they look at footage of Jack Sikma and they say, wow, Jack Sikma will be awesome today. He'd be a great stretch 5. You see what I'm saying? With the modern eye, Jack Sikma like a great player. And they look at that as skill, but what guys like Kareem and what Bill Russell did and Moses did, they look at that as just unskilled labor. You see what I'm saying with that? Look deeper into what I said. Listen carefully. Guys like Jack Sigma, right? You know, Jack Sigma, uh, not the same position, but he was able to do more than Jack Sigma, in my opinion, but in certain areas. Not the post, obviously, because Sigma was a very good post player, but Sigma, Nowitzki, okay. Look at what these guys were able to do at their positions. That's considered skill. But guys like Shaquille O'Neal, Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, especially the older Wilt, when he didn't put the ball on the floor anymore, uh, Kareem, what these guys did in the post, which was magical, when you appreciate what great post players can do, that's seen as unskilled now. There's something wrong here, man. There's something wrong with the perception of the center position, in my opinion, and post players in general. I understand basketball evolves, but I think there needs to be a return of the more traditional um, post players. So there's something odious about the Hall of Fame now. It's become the Hall of Very Good, and like I said, I have my issues with it terribly because I'm looking at the NBA landscape and I'm seeing like a lot of guys that people are saying are Hall of Famers. Andre Iguodala, I don't see how he's a Hall of Famer. He's a very good player, okay? Very good player. But if you're going to put Andre Iguodala in, then the Hall has to consider putting guys like Michael Cooper in. Michael Cooper was a multiple Defensive Player of the Year winner, if I'm not mistaken. I think he won it twice. Won 5 NBA championships in 12 seasons. Hell, maybe they should consider putting Robert Horry in. He won 7 championships, okay? Never a perennial all-star, but one of the better clutch players in the history of the NBA. He got, quote unquote, more rings than Jordan. See how dumbed down this argument's becoming about championships? Andre Iguodala at his best, okay, was a better player than those two guys, in my opinion. But at his best, Andre Iguodala was putting up 17, 18 points per game on some pretty bad Sixers teams. When he was in the lead position, he wasn't able to uh, put his team over the hump as far as being successful. But when you put him in a situation where he was an additional piece or an added piece, he flourished. That's great. But I think the Hall of Fame should be for guys who are consistently dominant in their positions, dominant for at least a decade or close to a decade, in my opinion. All right. The Hall of Fame in the NBA should be full of nothing but Michael Jordans, Charles Barkley's. It should not be a ring argument. It should be an argument about dominance and team success. Karl Malone, John Stockton, Patrick Ewing, all these guys are Hall of Famers. If you got to think about it, in my opinion, if you got to think about it really hard, they shouldn't be a Hall of Famer. Okay? Tom Chambers, if you look at that argument, he's not a Hall of Famer. But the same token, Tracy McGrady should not be a Hall of Famer. Grant Hill, if you look at the college thing, you're thinking about it, maybe he shouldn't be a Hall of Famer. Okay? That's my argument about this. There's too many people in the hall because people like them. They like them, not because of their overall playing dominance. But tell me what you guys think.